afternoon. I want to first of all express my gratitude to Reliance Infosystems for putting this together, and also to their valued partners like Microsoft, who have also graciously and generously supported this initiative. Ladies and gentlemen, I also want to congratulate you on taking this step in thinking very creatively about technology as to how you're going to put your firms on the global map in the area of artificial intelligence. Also, apologies for the rattling start. I'm sure we traveled very far and short to get here, right? Very interesting traffic day in Lagos. So we'll be talking very briefly today about driving innovation and adoption throughout the organization. What are the key success factors for creating an AI-first firm? And what are the implications for an AI-first firm in an emerging market like Nigeria? So what is strategy in the age of artificial intelligence? Now, sorry, I'm starting from here. You know, I'm actually a strategy professor in LBS, and we as teachers, we like to go back to first principles. So my apologies if I'm not as elegant, eloquent, and as exciting as the tech gurus in this room. But if you think about the traditional firm had to answer two questions. On the one hand, we are asking ourselves whether we are hospitality businesses, whether we are financial service providers like Housing Assets Group, whether we are retail businesses, whether we are oil and gas businesses. We have two concerns. How do we answer the questions in business model on the one hand, and on the second hand, how do we address the questions in our operating model? Now, what's the difference between your strategy and your operating model? Your strategy tries to ask and answer the question, how do I move my firm from where it is to where I want it to be? What's going to be that path? How do I grow revenues? How do I increase profitability? How do I grow profits? How do I increase customers? How do I increase customer satisfaction? And on the other hand, I'm also now trying to ask, in trying to move my organization from where it is to where I want it to be, how am I going to make sure that the business is profitable and sustainable in making that transition? So at that point, I begin to ask questions around my business model. How am I creating value? Who is creating the value? What is it costing to create that value? And how will this value be captured after it is created? And then on the other hand, I'm now asking, what's going to be the operating model? So for the operating model, I'm trying to ask questions like scale. So what is going to be my approach or route to radically growing the number of customers I have? What's going to be my approach to increasing my scale, which is, so my scale talks about how I increase the number of customers I'm serving. My scope talks about how I increase and services I'm particularly able to offer, while learning speaks to how my organization is able to learn from scope and scale in a way and manner that makes it possible for the organization to grow. Now, strategy in the order requires that we rethink and integrate three perspectives. On the one hand, we're asking, how do we as businesses increase product value? How do we as businesses also increase network value? And on the third hand, how do we increase learning value? Now, in product value, we're asking questions. What's the product? What's the opportunity we're trying to offer to the customer? Do we have a good product? Is this product solving the intended problem customer set out? What kind of innovation underlies the product or this concept? Now, for the network value, we're also trying to ask, How will the opportunity value change as more and more people join this network? What is going to be the product or service ecosystem delivery strategy? Because at the end of the day, the real businesses in the world that are really solving the biggest problems are service businesses. If you think about any economy in transition or any advanced economy, that economy thrives because the economy is able to move from offering what? Physical products to offering what? Services. And to offer services at scale, in most instances, as a business, you don't want to hold or responsibility for creating the product, creating the delivery system, and taking the responsibility of putting on all the complementary innovations that will enhance the value of the product. So the third angle is learning value. How will the product or service change as we soak in more data, collect more data, and what is going to be the role the data engine will play in creating value for the product, and how can we actually use algorithms, which are essentially software instructions and software codes, improve the product or service being delivered. If you think about innovation and strategy, think about this product. The people in this room are mixed. I can see some very young people and I can see some elderly. So I'm sure this concept of the Kodak camera is somewhere in between, right? At what point did this technology fail? Our earlier mobile phones, where we had the QWERTY keyboards and we had to press the buttons. What happened to all these innovations a couple of years back? Ladies and gentlemen, in this new world of artificial intelligence and technology, the new fuel to your growth is what? Data. Hello? What did I say? New fuel to your growth. Data. Data, data, and data. How do I get data from my customers, use this data to optimize advertising, transfer this data to developers who are going to create applications, products, and services? How will I also engage with the media? How will I talk to my consumers? And how will I connect e-commerce? What you tend to see is that data helps us create better algorithms, better service, more usage. Simply will understand how effective this facility was in helping us deliver this program, when they are able to get data from us as an organization as well as data from each of the individuals on your service experience, including experience with this microphone. That helps them understand how effective this facility was in providing the service. Now think about a situation where they don't collect the data. When the data consistently tells them in the last 10, 15 years, this has been the customer experience. And this is how this customer experience has affected reuse, has affected satisfaction, and is most likely going to influence use. Now, talking about your experience here is just one. Think about all the other touch points. Your journey to this place, your experience with their restrooms, your experience with their staff, the warmness, the support, and all of that. All of that all constitute what? Data points that help to either reinforce or destroy the experience. Now, how do we view of the firm? What we tend to see is businesses are now migrating from being product-based businesses to what? Platforms. The real new economy businesses are what? Platforms. There's a and the trick to platforms is that you must attain what? Scale. So platforms work on an up or not basis. If you don't have the scale to drive value, build on network effects. By the way, network effects are the benefits that existing users of your product or service get when more and more users come into that ecosystem. If you don't attain the scale you require for the platform to begin to create the value that will solve the problem, that platform continues to what? Struggle. Are you with me? Now we have some successful platforms. We have platforms like iPhone, Xfinity, like YouTube. Now, what have these platforms in common? These platforms are able to attract customers, build and sustain engagement. Now, engagement with revolutionary hardware, open APIs, serves critical masses compelling content. Now, as this engagement was coming up, the organizations who launched this started to drive early monetization. Now, monetization result what? A harvest of value. Now, this harvest of value showed up in new channels to capture value. So iPhone did things like the App Store, started selling Apple Music, launched the Apple Card, began to sell subscriptions on iCloud, and also offered iTunes. Xfinity had Xfinity Home, translated to Rogers, ultimately transited to Netflix Mobile, all mobile streaming services on your mobile. Same thing with YouTube. YouTube has products like YouTube Premium, Chromecast, and then even Android TV. Now, some platforms failed. By the way, the success rate of platforms is just 20%. And that's also the success rate of AI projects, 20%. The question is, why embark on an initiative that has an 80% chance of the problem is, well, not the problem, the reality is that 20% is what makes the remarkable difference. If you're able to get your business into that minority 20% that succeeds exceptionally, then your business has a chance to win and win very big. Now, what happened in Google Plus? They launched to everyone with a Gmail account. They were late to market. Same with Apple Ping and even the Windows Phone. Windows Phone never spurred adoption. There was a long tail of developers and it failed to gain critical mass. The stronger the network effects, the bigger the value. All of these things led to failure of the firms. Now, how do you think about strategy in the age of AI? And why is it important that every business executive at this time, whether you're in financial services, whether you're in oil and gas, whether you're in hospitality, whether you're in real estate, why must we all begin to think very seriously and very critically about artificial intelligence? The reason is because increasingly across the world, we're beginning to see a collision between traditional firms and AI-first firms. And I'll tell you the story of Ant Financial Services in China. Now, not all digital firms are the same. Digital networks and AI oftentimes add different dimensions to firm economics, firm strategy, firm competitiveness, and ultimately firm positioning. Now, in many instances, digital businesses still have to demonstrate sound product value. So if I'm a Cowrie Asset Management and I want to create an asset management product that is digital or offerable through a platform, that product must still solve the same traditional asset management products that I would, or rather must still give me that same utility as I would get if I walk into Cowrie's office in Victoria Island. So the digital product must still solve the customer's problems the way those problems have been conceptualized and designed. If you look at digitization, from the 1995s, what did we have? We had large mainframes where people would go into large rooms and enter in their computing information. We had corporate networks, we had tools, we had applications. We had mainframes, and it was in the 1990s that we had technologies like email. And a lot of the things we saw then were software licensing, direct monetization of the customer, IT ecosystem evolution. Now, let's come to 2005. Networks exploded. Organizations began to acquire and largely use PCs and browsers. We had static content. IT ecosystems began to scale, and then we had localized networks within industries. Now, 2005 to 2015, what did we see? We saw an explosion of what? Mobile. This of mobile also led to the return of what? Cloud computing. We also saw a return of artificial intelligence. Organizations began to have digital APIs, and these digital APIs made it possible to connect industries, and value capture at this point began to tip. Now, 2015 to now, what are we seeing? We're seeing firms move away now from digital transformation to creating what? AI first companies. So firms are no longer saying we want digital transformation. No, it's moved beyond digital transformation. It's now, how do we create AI first firms? How do we completely move to cloud? So pre-2015, cloud was something executives were debating. Should we have on-premise storage systems, or should we have cloud-based storage systems? Now it's no more a case of debate. It's now a case of what? Compulsion. Things like Internet of Things, augmented reality. Industries are now connected into a giant ecosystem. AI is driving transformation, and we're increasingly seeing a collision between traditional and digital firms. Now, let me pick a financial services group called Ant Services. Well, it's no longer called Ant Financial Services. It has actually evolved to Ant Group. Now, Ant Group was created by who? Alibaba in China. Today, Ant Group processes transactions in the excess of $23 trillion annually. Is way beyond the size of the European Union's economy. Do you understand? Now, Ant Financial Services has over 100 million users today. Of the 7 billion people in the world, a single financial institution has been able to bring what? 900 million consumers together. And if you pay in terms of users, you'll see that between 2006 and 2013, they were basically flat in the 200 million range. Now, in 2014, 2015, 2016, when you can see how radically the number of users has risen. Now, with Ant Financial Cloud, I think they are at about 1 users. And they are even rising faster. Now, what has it done? Because Ant Financial Services has access to the consumer and is able to use artificial intelligence to learn, to understand the lifestyle and the circumstances of the consumer, Ant is able to create what? Payment propositions and payment solutions that what? Solve the problem of the consumer in a way and manner that the consumer has never seen. I had the privilege of visiting Shanghai in June last year. And in the course of my visit, I had to use Alipay. And what I saw from Alipay, the payment use cases, how they were using things like facial recognition to pay, QR code payment, payment enablement, payment using multiple modes, even paying for your movie tickets and booking your flights through the app in a way and manner that the app also gives and supports all the information. The app has made itself the center of the life of the typical South Asian consumer. I found to be incredibly fascinating. What that even told me is that payments and financial services hasn't started in Nigeria yet. with extremely long way to go. If you think anything has happened, trust me, you ain't seen nothing yet. Yes. Think about new institutions that came into play 3-4 years ago. But their valuation is more than 25% of the valuation or even the market capitalization of the Nigerian banking industry. These are institutions that don't have offices. These are institutions that don't have cars. And let me tell you the bigger problem. The bigger problem is that the way these institutions have defined and designed their business models as AI first firms, they are on a race that their traditional incumbents cannot catch. Did you hear me? They are on a race that what? The traditional incumbents cannot catch. You know why? First of all, let's look at their business model. Their business model is that they don't have physical branches. They've outsourced all their cash handling services, agency management services, correspondent banking services to who? The commercial banks. Now, when their agents visit machines of the commercial banks and there is no cash, who does central bank penalize? The commercial bank. Whose customer is being underserved? Moniepoint or Opay's customer. Think about that. What is driving their valuation? Number of daily active users. They are fast building a rail. Even institutions that refuse to use them are now realizing that they don't have a choice. These guys account for nearly 70% of the transaction volumes on NIPS. Combined, they have over 120 million Nigerians in their network. Now, a lot of the things that traditional bourgeois, the kinds of people in this room, worry about, trust me, the Okada rider, the market woman selling puff-puff, who are the real Nigerians, they don't have those risk concerns. They are not worried or concerned about the presence or absence of a physical bank branch. What are they interested in? Value. Value. And what are these guys doing with their AI systems? Every single day they are what? Learning. Simplifying. Today on their corporate banking app, you can incorporate your company. They will do the incorporation for you on their app. So they take away that hassle of traveling to Abuja, looking for a lawyer, drafting your memos and article of association. They will do the incorporation for you with the seed placed into the account. So what you tend to see is they are systematically thinking about all the roadblocks and all the challenges customers are encountering. And that's exactly what Ant Financial Services has done. By creating a payment infrastructure and using AI and technology that penetrated and permeated the life of the typical Chinese consumer. Offering at the click of a finger educational services, medical services, retail, pick-up, drop-off, in-store shopping, daily household services, credits, money transfer, transportation, your Uber, your Didi, all of them are accessible through your Alipay, mobile top, online shopping, gaming, dining, public welfare, and even financial services. They have made themselves undisputed singular problem solver for the South Asian consumer. Now, they couldn't have achieved this, using the traditional business model. Completely impossible. This would have been impossible to achieve without IT. Now, the funny thing is that they have valuations in the 80-90% range of their competitors in developed markets. And they only have about 15 or 20% of the employees, the infrastructure and the hardware that those guys have. How can you catch up with such a person? The person's business model is designed for what? Scaling and what? Speed. While your own business model is designed to what? Slow down and what? Stifle. So, executives, it's time for us to roll up our sleeves and rethink our business models. When the disruptors come and disrupt us, we will no longer exist. And what do you tend to firms like this use platforms, human-centered design processes to create these solutions. And the types of solutions they create trump and transcend things like Gen AI. So what you tend to see is they are now thinking more critically about the consumer. So they are not constrained by barriers or concerns like regulation, like, infrastructure, like cost. Their main central focus is the customer. How do I identify all the customer's needs and problems? How do I solve your transportation needs? How do I solve your air ticketing needs? How do I solve your needs to pay your children's school fees? How do I provide housing and accommodation for you? How do I make it possible for you to buy a ticket? All of these they are able to achieve because they have the customer, they have the data, and they understand the customer's financial flows and transaction needs. Do you understand? Now, these firms more and more, and better data they soak, the more they are able to solve problems and improve services. So they've evolved to creating and offering credit. By the way, a lot of the credit they offer is credit provided by other AI-based financial institutions. What are the points of dissatisfaction? How can we pull efficiencies and how can we increase productivity? How can we ensure that the data we are gathering is clean, is accurate, is normal, and is integrated? Now, the data pipeline is the first. The second is what? The algorithm development, which is building the software systems that help integrate this data, question this data, utilize this data, whether it's ChatGPT using generative AI, or whether it's any other type of artificial intelligence technology, or all of the use cases you're going to be hearing in this program. Is it supervised learning, unsupervised learning, reinforcement learning, and other types of AI? Now, the third leg of the AI factory is what? Infrastructure development. So as first, we have to ask, how do we stack and purpose our technology? As a bank that I'm setting up newly, what kind of technology will I use? Do I use a scalable technology? Who are going to be my infrastructure or my technology providers? For these guys that are going to be providing my technology, am I going to procure this technology on a modular basis, or am I going to procure this technology on a flat basis, such that I'm locked into this client or I'm locked into this service provider, and in the event that the service provider pulls out, I find it extremely difficult to repurpose and plug out my system? One of the things I would always recommend is businesses should think about infrastructure from what? A modular standpoint. Such can yank off, take out your workflows, and plug into new systems. For any single product or service or artificial intelligence challenge you encounter, there are 30 or 40 startups out there that are trying to solve the problem. A huge company in this space, by the way, I'm sure you are aware, is Reliance Infosystems. So you have to think very carefully about your technology infrastructure. Now, think about the value or the utility. Firms like Ant Financial Services, as they grow their number of users, the impact of AI expands and is more and more exponential. Traditional companies, as they grow and increase their number of users, what you tend to see is that their systems what? Flatten and flat out. They attain a scale where they stretch out their physical facilities, the physical people they have in their business. But then for AI first companies, you tend to see that their scaling is what? Geometric. They continue to grow, and then they have no barriers that stop them from scaling and expanding. I've talked about the components, which include the data pipeline, how you build out your algorithms, and how you purpose or structure your infrastructure. Now, how do you industrialize your data? In thinking about your data again, ask, how do I integrate my data sources, my internal data sources? How do I integrate data that comes from the customer complaints unit, the sales unit, the account opening unit, the procurement unit? How do I integrate all of this data and have an artificial intelligence system that speaks to all these data points and helps me identify leverage points where I can actually enhance efficiency and increase productivity? How do I create single decision points? And how do I identify people in the firm who understand two things? So essentially, there are two kinds of skills you need in the firm. You need someone who understands business or technology. You need someone who understands the business on the one hand, and then you need someone who on the other hand understands technology. Because that's how you can sort of bridge that divide. Now, traditional firms have systems that are what? Siloed. What you tend to in siloed systems is that the financial forecasts are disconnected from demand planning. Demand planning is disconnected from demand forecasting. Demand forecasting is disconnected from inventory management. Inventory management is disconnected from sales and operations planning forecasting. You tend to see that information technology projects are everywhere, scattered, and then the data storage is what? Siloed. Such have data stored in point of sales, advertising, CRM, distributor systems, retail sales, supply chain, materials requirement planning, and accounting systems. What you tend to see is that this data does each other. And even the CEO doesn't have a single view of this data. We don't understand the correlation, understand the causations, and we don't understand the points of integration of this data. Do you understand? But then what you in the AI first company is that all of the processes are AI enabled. Once they are AI enabled, what happens? The processes begin to speak to each other. The data systems begin to flow into libraries, a solid data fabric, and a data factory from where you can actually interrogate, question, and pull data that speaks to all parts of the business. You have teams that are more agile, and then you have people who have the capacity using technology to look at different parts of the firm simultaneously. Do you understand? Now, an example of platform vision is that the data science tool this firm used has about 7 channels that have operating models, the data itself, experimentation, creating experiments of this data, reporting, and self-service. You have data delivery systems that ensure that the data comes into the channel, and then you have sound governance. So one thing again you need to have with artificial intelligence is what? Governance. You need to have governance system that define ethical use, ethical data collection, ethical analysis, and then ethical approaches to analysis and even utilization or productization. And ultimately, there's a publication, and then the teams now decouple the processes. So you have a single platform, but you are able to sort of integrate everything using artificial intelligence. We are feeding an increasingly digital and integrated operating model AI factory that will enable a high level of agility in deploying AI to a broad variety of our business processes. Now, while this technology may sound somewhat abstract at this time, one thing is very clear. The winners in this race who take off are going to be the people who are going to enjoy in leaps and bounds. We already have a live case in Nigeria here in our financial services industry, where new players who were seemingly referred to as small institutions are pulling off feats that are not just remarkable but are stunning, to say the least. Achieving multiple and are racing gallantly to actually take the lead and redefine the landscape in the delivery of financial services in this market. Like I said earlier, the challenge in this space is what? Scale. You need to have scale so that your incremental cost of delivering an additional unit of product or service does what? Reduces. And of course, as you migrate these users more and more to self-systems where they serve themselves, you sort of see that the problem gets out of the way. So like I said, there is a collision between what? Traditional businesses and what? Digital businesses. At that point of collision, what happens? Traditional businesses begin to tank, while businesses begin to what? And like I said, traditional businesses have business and operating models that are what? Obsolete, unfit for purpose, expensive, and cannot solve the problems intended. Wake up call. What happened to this firm called Nokia? Who remembers? 2005, Nokia was the largest and the most valuable phone company in the world. 2015, what happened? What happened to Nokia? There was no fraud. So just so you know, there was no Nigerian in their management. There was nobody in their management team. There was no fraud. But Nokia was the largest phone company 2005. Big Finnish company. Doing exceptionally well. What killed this great company? 1999, they were the first phone with the web browser. 2000, the first smartphone that allowed third-party apps. 2002, they were second in offering the camera phone. 2000 were the first phone with what? Touch screen. 2007, they created the OVI App Store, acquiring Navtech, Symbian, with a market share of 67%. Now, if you look at their life here, you'll see that with iPhone's introduction in 2007, with the Windows deal, of course, the Windows deal happened here shortly before they, died. You can see that in the peak of 2007 or so, they were valued at $100 billion. But when they were finally disposed, 0.35 billion in 2016. From 100 billion in 2007. In less than 10 years, they were 0.3. Less than 1. They were sold for what? Scrap. Now, what were main differences and how did Apple, Google, and Android defeat Nokia in this race? Nokia had several products and several product lines. They had focused and dedicated teams. They had heavyweight project management. They had hardware teams that were optimized by what? Product line. Data analytics embedded in the products. On the other hand, their competitors had what? Only one platform. Their competitors spent their energy optimizing what? The hardware. And they left the responsibility of developing the apps and software to all of you, third-party app developers. They left that to you. And then that responsibility of creating the technology, they retained. And then also, they centralized data sourcing. They had universal API. Anybody could actually plug in. Of course, one very strong evidence of their universal APIs were like Google Play Store. Google Play Store and Apple Store. Now, the process in Nokia was top-down. So everything had to get approval of the organ. The product guys would design the product, it goes through product testing, the product testing finish, the assessors do, it keeps moving through the ranks until it gets the final nod of the CEO. They were purely based on internal development. So they said that this business, they will own all aspects of the development of the app. So they're going to take full end-to-end responsibility for building out and owning the app. They have proprietary IP, but Google and Apple, on the other hand, had more agile, iterative app teams. Their focus was what? On the ecosystem. They realized from day one that they didn't have what it took to build and own and take responsibility of all of the apps. So what you tend to see is that even though all of us on this table have iPhones, our iPhones have vastly different configurations and can offer what? Vastly different services. The same word, iPhone. I use mine to check my blood pressure. He uses his to do his stock trading. He uses his own to do his retail business. She uses hers to check the camera to make sure the kids are safe at home and no one is hurting them. You tend to realize that we all have the same technology, but we have the flexibility to configure the technology the way we like. On the other hand, Nokia said no, we will dictate to you the technology you will use. We'll give you the device, and we're also going to take full spectrum responsibility for giving you all the applications on the app. So what tended to happen was that their technologies and their phones were coming out 6 months late. Because the time it will take them to test and do this, you have 100 different teams testing and doing it in the ecosystem. And these 100 teams make their apps available and accessible through an app store that you can utilize or access from a singular device. So what you tend to see is that phone defined as a unified architecture for this guy one, and for these guys that struggle, the platform was defined as common components across product units. Every product was customized, their APIs were clunky, and their ecosystem was incredibly tiny. So they did nothing wrong. It's just that technology moved and they failed to discard their traditional operating model, and they did not migrate to what? An AI-first firm that will make it possible for them to gather data and move with speed. Second is scope. How do I modularly increase radically the number of customers I have that use my products or service? And the third is learning. How do I improve how my organization learns and improves and evolves? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Nkem.